How are the new freight classifications working out? Assuring cargo safety in ocean freight. And procurement under pressure. Pull up a chair and join us as the editors of DC Velocity discuss these stories, as well as news and supply chain trends on this week's Logistics Matters podcast. Hi, I'm Dave Maloney. I'm the Group Editorial Director at DC Velocity. Welcome. Logistics Matters is sponsored by DHL Supply Chain. Where can supply chain professionals go for the latest news and insight? DHL's All Business, No Boundaries podcast is a collection of supply chain stories by DHL Supply Chain, a North American leader in contract logistics. Check out DHL Supply Chain's All Business, No Boundaries podcast, available at dhl.com/ABNB podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. As usual, our DC Velocity senior editors Ben Ames and Victoria Kickham will be along to provide their insights into the top stories of this week. But to begin today, the trucking industry earlier this summer moved into a new classification system for freight. How's it been working out so far? And how are the new freight classifications affecting both shippers and carriers? To find out, here's Victoria with today's guest. Victoria?
Thanks, Dave. Our guest today is Clete Cordero. He's Vice President of Pricing and Traffic for Southeastern Freight Lines. Clete is also Chairman of the National Motor Freight Traffic Association, or NMFTA, and he's here to talk about recent changes to the NMFTA's National Motor Freight Classification System, which is an industry standard that's widely used by shippers and carriers to classify freight for less than truckload shipments. Welcome, Clete.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. So changes to the NMFC system took effect in July. I wonder if you could just sort of remind us what those changes were and how they affect both shippers and carriers.
Yes, Victoria. Prior to July, inside the classification, there's two types of ways product can be classified. It could have a single class, meaning it could be exactly class 65, 85, or one of the classes it's assigned. I mean, it's a single class. The other way, which we're moving towards, it's to do away with the single class system and make it more density based. So what that means is your product is based on the density of the product determines what class it is. And normally in the LTL classification system, the lower the class, the more dense the product. So a pallet of cement blocks would be class 50 versus a pallet of maybe cotton balls would be class 400. And so the class is used inside tariffs to help determine the rate. So normally the lower the class, the lower your rate's going to be. The higher the class, the higher the rate's going to be. So that's the changes is moving it more to a density-based system than what's been in the past.
So the way I understand it is these revisions were designed to sort of streamline and simplify what was considered a pretty complex system for classifying freight. Like, would you say that goal has been accomplished?
Victoria, absolutely would. It's. Okay. I wish I could show it. It wasn't a podcast, but the old classification book was. I'm holding my hands out about 3 inches thick, so you really had to be an expert to look up an item. If you look up a nut, for instance, a nut. Is it edible? Is it not edible? Is it shelled? Is it salted? Is it in the raw? Is it been harvested? So all those different items were a different class. So unless you were an expert, it was pretty hard to determine the individual class for a commodity. Now it's made it easy because as long as you know how to take density, which is length times width times height divided by the weight, you can now find the class. So it's made it much, much simpler in our industry for both carriers and shippers. So I would say that goal's been accomplished.
So you just look for as you said, that density rather than sort of sifting through all kinds of different categories for your particular product. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. And how has the transition been so far? From your perspective as a carrier, but also more broadly as a representative of NMFTA. So these, took effect July. Essentially, how easy or difficult has it been for companies to sort of adapt?
My answer is going to be, it has been very, very, very easy. And my answer may be skewed coming from the chairman of the NMFTA, but
right.
I was on a call this morning with a customer and he was asking me the same question, and I asked him the question back, and he gave a really good answer. He said, Clete, This reminds me of Y2K. Leading up to the year 2000, there was a lot of noise in the journals, publications that the world was going to end, the power wouldn't be working, we couldn't get water come, the morning of January 1st, 2000, because of computer issues. He said the whole world was nervous. But then you get to January 1st, everybody wakes up and nothing's changed. There's no need to be nervous. He said he relates the classification change on July 19th the same way. He said there's been a lot of noise the first half of this year that this change was going to create problems, billing discrepancies. The shippers would not know what class to use. And he said it's actually made it so much easier. There's been no noise on it. So I'm going to say easy, but I'm also hearing from our shippers that this has been a very easy change.
Yeah, I remember Y2K, so that's a good good analogy there. What are some of the financial and operational impacts to carriers? For example, how does this affect pricing strategy? What does it look like when you're actually putting all this into practice?
This is almost a pricing person's dream. And what I mean by that, a pricing person at a carrier, they're charged to make sure that we have, at the end of the day, we have made the right margin on each individual shipment we handle. Well, all we have to sell as an LTL carrier is space on a truck. So if we sell space on a truck, I've always wondered in my career, why don't we charge based on the space on the truck? So now what the classification system is doing, because we're charging and the rates determined by density, we are now charging by space on the truck. So from a pricing person, this is what we've dreamed of, to move to something like this. And I've used this analogy in a meeting last week. And I've got 3 children and they're in college, but I've got 2 boys and 1 girl. If you ask my boys where they want to go eat, they're inevitably going to say some kind of buffet. They're going to say, let's go to Golden Corral, because they can eat as much as they want and it's one price. So what's going to happen, Golden Corral, I guarantee you, are going to lose money on my 2 boys. But then my wife, if her and I go on a date, we went this weekend, and she loves going to this yogurt shop in the town I live. Well, when you go into the yogurt shop, you make your yogurt, whatever toppings you want. And when you get done, you put the yogurt on a scale and you pay by the ounce. And that's really what the classification system is moving to. We used to be the old buffet model where it's one price no matter how much you ate, and you would make money on some shippers and lose money on some shipments. Well, now going to this quote unquote frozen yogurt model where now you're paying by the ounce. My wife, her cup's going to be a lot less than mine because I'm going to put more in it. And I think that's a fair way to do it. And so from a pricing perspective, there's a lot of people that are excited about this change on both the shippers and carrier side.
Yeah, I was going to ask next how does that affect shippers then? Is it better for them? I mean, how is it generally affecting them?
I can give you my opinions, and that's a question I always have a tough time answering because I want to give the disclaimer. I'm answering for them, but I'm not in their world.
Sure.
But I do know one shipper told me, and he's a large shipper. He said he's excited for this change because now what happens, if he can go to his individual plants and warehouses, and he's got them all throughout the country. He said, if we can package our freight better and make it more dense, make it, utilize the cube of the pallet better. He said, I can lower my freight charges because I'm going to put more density on that pallet. And I said, absolutely. So there's an incentive now to improve the cube that they're shipping with. So I'm hearing from some shippers, it's giving them some incentive to improve their packaging, improve how they package items, because they know they're going to benefit now from their rate, where before they may have not have.
So the revamping of the NMFC isn't over, as I understand it. This was just the first step in a longer process. Can you tell us what's next?
Yes, ma'am. So in the classification, there's about 5,000 different items. With this classification change, this took care of about 2,000 of them, moving those 2,000 to density based. Now, what's going to happen is the NMFTA is going to continue going through the classification book. The estimation is it will take anywhere from another 1.5 to 2 years, and they're going to research all the remaining items to the idea to try to move them to a density-based system, move them like the others. There may still need to be some that need to be a single class because it's a unique item, because of the handling, the stowability of the product. But if it's not, they're going to research these items and move them over to a density base. So it'll take about a year and a half, 2 years. And one question I always get, well, why don't we just do it at one time, one fell swoop? What the NMFTA does is they'll put out a docket, and the next docket is due in, I believe, September. It'll be voted on at the 1st of October and then put into place at the end of November. When they put a docket out, they welcome public comments. So they don't want to overwhelm the industry. So they're trying to release so many at one time so people really have the opportunity to go through it, look at them, and make a decision on. So there'll be one more docket this year, and then we're looking next year to have 3 more dockets. So it'll take about a year, year and a half to complete all the items to go through it, to revamp it.
Great, thank you. And I imagine if our listeners are looking for information, they go to the NMFTA website. I don't know if you have that
Yes,
information
Victoria,
handy.
yes, nmfta.org. And it's got all the information about the public meetings, the dockets, and the upcoming changes on there.
Terrific. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to mention to our listeners, anything they should pay attention to as we move forward.
It's the one thing I will mention that along with the classification change, the NMFTA released a new product called Class IT Plus. So they've created a lookup tool, this Class IT Plus. It's using AI, different search engines to make it even simpler now to look up your item and get the right NMFC item number. So not only did they make the determination of classes easier, they've actually on the other side made it easier to use a computer to look up these items. So that's also out there, the Class IT Plus product.
Terrific. Clete, thanks very much for joining us today. We appreciate your insight on this topic.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks again. So we have been talking with Clete Cordero of Southeastern Freight Lines. Back to you, Dave.
Thank you, Clete and Victoria. Now let's take a look at some of the other supply chain news from the week. And Ben, you wrote this week about how there appear to be gaps in the standards for assuring cargo safety in ocean freight. What are you seeing?
Yeah, that's true, Dave. This came with some timing that a lot of people in transportation and logistics this week have seen a video of a shipping container accident at the port of Long Beach in California, where several stacks of containers tumbled off a ship that had recently arrived at the port. Something like 70 containers fell overboard, and 2 or 3 dozen are at the bottom of the harbor. Fortunately, no one was hurt. And while we don't yet know the cause of that incident, it did come coincidentally at the same time that we covered another story this week about gaps in how various countries report failings in cargo inspections for ocean freight. The report came from the World Shipping Council, and they are urging stronger safety measures for ocean freight, and they've reinstated, in fact, a cargo inspection deficiency data series to measure it. So most recently, the council found that about 11.5% of inspected cargo shipments in 2024 were found to have deficiencies, and that's up about 0.5 percentage from the year before. So the deficiencies that they're talking about include misdeclared or undeclared dangerous goods, just plain incorrect documentation, or improper packing.
Ben, you mentioned dangerous goods there. Some of those conditions, I imagine, would be hard and dangerous for the port and for other workers who have to handle those containers. Did the report have any suggestions about improving some of that safety?
Yes, according to the council, the international law empowers the states, the nations where the port is located, to inspect the containers to ensure that cargo complies with international regulations and standards, of course. But WSC said that not enough nations share those outcomes publicly. So the president of World Shipping Council, Joe Kramick, said that cargo safety starts with correct declaration and safe packing of goods. With over 1 in 10 shipments showing deficiencies, the message is clear, he said. Gaps in cargo safety remain far too common. And as we just said, cargo deficiencies put crews, ships, the cargo itself, and even the environment at risk. So the council said that by now reinstating its reporting program, it can better identify trends. And in fact, they said that only 7 port states are currently reporting the data that they collect. They did not name those. So there is an opportunity here for more governments to contribute their data. That would strengthen the global picture, and it would help to make shipping safer for everyone. Additionally, the Shipping Council is working on sort of wider cargo safety work. They're helping develop a checklist for packing containers safely. They're trying to support efforts to reduce containers lost at sea, and they're working on other groups with stronger dangerous goods rules. So, there are a lot of initiatives going on here, but with more than 1 in 10 containers not complying, there's obviously work to be done.
Right, and we certainly hope they will be able to find some ways to be able to reduce the amount of dangerous cargo, especially. And as far as those containers lost at sea, we won't want anybody's Christmas presents lost this year in the ocean.
That's true. That's a good point. Yep, there's no telling what's in any container that might go over.
Thank you, Ben.
Glad to.
And Victoria, navigating supply chains is certainly not easy within the current economy and shifting trade policies. And you wrote this week about a group that is having a particularly difficult time in doing their jobs. What are you seeing?
Well, the challenging business climate that we're in is placing increased strain on procurement departments, and it's slowing their ability to respond quickly and manage risk. And this is according to a report from procurement software company Oro Labs, and that was released this week. The report is the company's inaugural State of Enterprise Procurement Ability report. So they surveyed more than 200 executives at large firms, companies with 500 million or more in annual revenue, and their goal was to measure trends and issues affecting procurement teams. They found that some of the biggest issues that we've been reporting on recently, things like tariffs, inflation, supplier volatility, are sort of colliding with internal pressures like shrinking teams and disconnected IT systems to really hinder the agility of many procurement departments. And one of the survey's key findings kind of puts this in perspective. Nearly half of the procurement executives that they surveyed said that the pressure on their function is higher than usual, with 16% saying they are experiencing the most intense period in the past 3 years. And this is leading to some pretty concerning outcomes. 1 in 4 of those surveys said they've loosened supplier risk standards to keep pace with the changing business climate.
Victoria, that's a concerning statistic. Did they give any specifics on that? How are they loosening those standards?
Yeah, they said that those companies, and again, about 25%, are increasing their tolerance for risk by working with suppliers who may have lower credit ratings, for example, or who may have limited documentation. So really just a relaxing of standards in general. And again, this is all to deal with a difficult sourcing environment. The good news, though, is that almost as many executives surveyed, 24%, said they have actually tightened risk requirements by adding stricter vetting or compliance checks. So that's good. But I think this illustrates an interesting dynamic, and the company put it pretty succinctly in a statement announcing their research. They said the results really underscore how quickly procurement is being pulled in different directions in this current climate. So the report also identifies how tariffs, labor problems, and technology are weighing on the situation. And listeners can learn more by checking out the story online, which includes a link to the report as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and we hope that listeners will check it out. Thank you, Victoria.
You're welcome.
And we do encourage listeners to go to dcvelocity.com for more on these and other supply chain stories. And as Victoria just mentioned, we also have podcast notes with direct links to read more about the topics that we discussed today, including the story she just mentioned. And we'd like to thank again Clete Cordero of Southeastern Freight Lines for being our guest. We welcome your comments on this topic and our other stories. You can email us at podcast@agilebme.com. We also encourage you to subscribe to Logistics Matters at your favorite podcast platform. Our new episodes are uploaded on Fridays. And speaking of subscribing, check out our sister podcast series, Supply Chain in the Fast Lane. We have a new 8-episode series that's been fully released on the top threats to our supply chains. A few of the topics we address are geopolitical risks, economic instability, cybersecurity risks, threats to energy and electric grids, supplier risk, transportation disruptions. All those episodes are now available to stream, so check out Supply Chain in the Fast Lane wherever you get your podcasts. And a reminder that Logistics Matters is sponsored by DHL Supply Chain. Where can supply chain professionals go for the latest news and insight? DHL's All Business No Boundaries podcast is a collection of supply chain stories by DHL Supply Chain, a North American leader in contract logistics. Check out DHL Supply Chain's All Business No Boundaries podcast, available at dhl.com/ABNB podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back again next week with another edition of Logistics Matters. Be sure to join us. Until then, have a great week.